Right. Shalom, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well. Hope you guys can hear me okay. I assume you can. Not some little shout. There we go. All right, here we go. Topic for today is Kabbalah and the Coca-Cola culture. Okay, my friends, extra points for anyone who actually flips on their camera. If you can't, I understand. But if you can, extra points. So here goes. When we talk about Kabbalah and the Coca-Cola culture, before we get into it, actually, let's do a little review of what we've been speaking about up till now. A little 2-minute review. All right, we started off a couple of weeks ago by speaking about the concept of spirituality. And we spoke about how the beginning and the roots of spirituality is to get outside of yourself, right? We spoke about personal freedom, and that means more than just I'm free to do whatever I feel like doing whenever I feel like doing it, but actually that it means that actually there's a little bit of slavery inherent in doing whatever you feel like doing whenever you feel like doing it, right? Aren't you just, if you do that, aren't you just following whatever your whim is of that particular moment, right? So there's a little bit of slavery wrapped up in there, a little personal slavery wrapped up in there. And so what we discussed there is that the beginning of spirituality is the beginning of the assertion of the human spirit is to be able to get outside of oneself, outside of one's instinct or initial gut reaction, and to be able to kind of get beyond that in order to go ahead and make a choice, meaning that you could be being pulled in one direction, and to be able to extract yourself from that, observe that going on, and choose in another direction, right? That is the beginning of asserting the human spirit, to be able to make that choice. And so we explained how this is the beginning of the concept of spirituality, okay? So that was 2 weeks ago. Last week, we jumped in with a question, which was, all right, if we have clarified the beginning of spirituality, that we want to be able to be a certain freedom of self, right? When we achieve that, next comes the following question, which is, now that I have achieved being free from myself, my desires, my whims, where society is pulling me, where the culture is pulling me, all that kind of stuff. Once I become free from that, what do I want to be free for? And so we spoke last week about the concept of joy, and we ultimately brought that to holy joy. We ultimately brought that to, okay, the reason why we work the way we work, the way our joy works, right? Which is, joy essentially, we said last week, is the experience of actualizing the reality of who you are. So, and we spoke about the highest level of that is clarifying the reality that, like, okay, we are, that we're godly souls, and the reason why we want to actualize ourselves from that our joy, what makes us tick, is this idea of actualizing the reality of who we are into expression, into actualization, is because that's what a soul is all about here in this world. And so I want to delve in that a little bit more today, and then you'll see what it'll take us today to the concept of what I like to call Kabbalah and the Coca-Cola culture, in which we'll also get into a Kabbalistic concept called Klipa and see where it is in different ways in our life and how hopefully we can override that and get past it and get through it, right? So let's just revisit for a second. Not sure how much we really talked about it last week, this concept of the soul, right? Because what do we mean when we say that we're a soul? So if we can do this in a nutshell, I think what we would say is like this, that the concept of what we mean by a soul, the way it's defined in the classic Kabbalistic sources, is that a soul is an aspect of the divine, an aspect of godliness here in this world that seems to be not all that divine, not all that spiritual, not all that godly, right? And the idea is that for us to go ahead and to live out our inherent godliness, even here in this world, which seems to be not all that godly. And so that leaves us with a little bit of a conflict from time to time, right? On the one hand, my higher desire is to live out that aspect of myself, that soul side of myself. However, if I'm not being conscious, right, clearly we don't go in that direction automatically, right? I'm going to go in all sorts of other directions. So let's understand that a lot of times we'll have things that we want, or that we desire, or that we even feel like we want to build something, right? And we feel satisfied with that a lot of the time, even if it's not going in the direction of our ultimate highest purpose. Okay, so for example, have you ever had the experience, maybe when you're a kid, have you ever had the experience of building a collection? Maybe you had a baseball card collection, a basketball card collection, a comic book collection, a stamp collection, right? Some people, when they're older, they have a car collection if they can afford it, right? All sorts of different collections sometimes that human beings have, and human beings are funny creatures. Why is it that we build a collection of something? Where is that coming from in a person? Yeah, you hear that question? It's interesting to think about. And before we get to the answer to that question, we should recognize that this idea of building a collection is a uniquely human thing. And don't talk to me about beavers, because that is for a purpose. Okay. And I know there's one exception to the rule. Apparently there's some bird who collects flashy looking things. You're right. That's a good question to what I'm going to say. But in general here, right, 99% of the time, I think we'd have to say that you don't find animals making collections, except for if it's for survival. You don't find them making just collections of things, right? And so it's important to hone in on the fact that if we find a human being interested in doing something that animals aren't interested in doing, that's a good sign that it's coming from the place within a person whereby the person is something different than the animal. Okay, so if a person is driven to something, or is interested in something, has a desire to something that animals aren't driven to or have a desire for, so that's coming from the aspect of a person that is different than the animal, right? So if the animals are not, imagine like you have an elephant making a comic book collection. No, you don't have such a thing, right? So that means it comes from a part of a person that is different than the elephant. Okay, so what is that exactly? So what is going on there? You tell me, why is it that a person is making a comic book collection, right? Even when they're younger, forget about it, right? When they're older, same thing applies, right? A person's collecting things, a person makes a car collection, or what, and but where is it coming from? So I want to put forth that the place that I believe it is coming from is that within a person, when they're collecting something, it's coming from the side of themselves that wants to build something. Now, what do you want to build? With something like this, by building this collection, you are trying to attribute some meaningfulness to this collection, right? It's a certain aspect of building, like you're giving it meaning. You're going beyond. It's like it's going beyond yourself, right? So let me give you another example. A number of years ago, there was an auction in a hotel somewhere in Europe. I think it might have been Sweden or Norway. And there was a record-breaking bid put on the object that was being auctioned off. It was a $46 million bid. What was the object that this person was putting the bid on? It was a diamond. It was a pink diamond. Now, of course, he won the auction. He won the diamond. Bought it, whatever. By the way, whose record did this guy break? I give you 10 guesses. It was his own. A couple of years earlier, the same character bid $34 million on a different precious gem. So question, what do you think is going on within this person, this rare gem collector, as he purchases these precious stones, right? Can you hear the idea that it's not just about investment, and it's not just about I'd like to have some luxury in my life because I could afford it, right? Clearly, that's not what's being said. Clearly, that's not what's happening. If you had to really put your finger on it, yeah. So here, what Juana says over here. Sarah Rachel is wondering where she can get some of that from. This is what Juan is saying over here. It's creating in your mind something that brings you pleasure and honor, Right. So it's something like that. I would go a little bit of a step further, which is that it's, yes, I like the honor aspect, but can you hear the idea that the guy is trying to be like the rare gem collector? That's going to be his thing. That's going to be something that he's trying to build a legacy for himself, right? In this particular aspect, he's trying to build a legacy for himself. There you go. He's trying to build a character. As you said, be unique. And so what does that mean? That means to say that it's about being bigger than yourself. It's about being bigger than your limitations. It's about doing your best to build, right? It's to fill that desire within us that wants to build meaningfully. Now, building meaningfully, of course, Jewishly, we would say, that means living out your soul. That means living out your spiritual side, connecting to God, which maybe we'll talk about next time, what that means and what that looks like. Concept of connection to the infinite in Kabbalah. But that building meaningfully is accomplished by connecting to the infinite and by living out your spirituality here in this physical world through refining your characteristics. Now, all of that, what I just said, that sounds like internal transformation. That sounds like living your life in accordance with, some kind of higher reality, and sounds like it takes some effort. So can you hear the idea that in a certain respect, it's easier to spend $46 million on a rare gem, right? There's a side of myself that desires that which is meaningful. There's a side of myself that desires that which goes on, right? And the problem is that I can easily go ahead and access other things that give me that feeling, even though that's not really what's happening, right? So instead of going ahead and doing introspection and making real changes in my life, I will start building a comic book collection. I will start getting into a particular, getting passionate about something, and attribute meaningfulness to that thing, despite the fact that objectively, of course, we know it's not meaningful, right? And this is an important thing because people talk about, well, hold on a second, who are you? Maybe it's relatively meaningful. Maybe to that person who is collecting the gems, it's relatively meaningful to them. The answer is yes, okay, of course, you're right. I can't argue the fact that it is relatively meaningful to them. If they feel meaningfulness from it, then by definition, it is to them, relative to them, it is meaningful. But what we're saying here is when you put up relative meaningfulness, you put that up against objective meaningfulness, we see that relative meaningfulness isn't meaningful, because if it doesn't go on, it's not meaningful, right? And so this is the idea of what we might call Kabbalistically, you can have you can have building, and you can have the other side of building, right? There's building, which is I'm building who I really am, what I'm really here for, what I was placed on this earth for, what is building in accordance with that which is true. Or I can be doing other things that feel that way a little bit, and therefore they satisfy that side of myself that's desiring it for the most part. So I could kind of pacify that side of myself that desires growth. Let's just be clear, right? The soul within each person wants to grow, wants to build meaningfully. However, there's within that, we can be taken astray to build other things that are not all that meaningful, but the whole reason we're into building those things is because there's a desire within ourselves to build that which is meaningful. Do you hear that idea? This in Kabbalah is called klipa. Klipa in Kabbalah, it literally translates as a shell. Why? Because the shell is the thing that's surrounding the fruit. It's standing in the way of you getting the fruit, but the whole reason and the whole manner in which it grows is only because it is attached to the fruit. So the thing that's preventing you from getting the fruit is itself growing from the fruit. Its life force comes from the fruit itself. And that's exactly what's going on here. The soul desires to build itself, to build meaningful, to build its connection to God, etc. And then a lot of times we'll get into all sorts of other things that take us away from building our purpose. And the only reason we're even into those things in the first place is because we have a desire to grow towards our purpose. Right? Again, comic book collection, a diamond collection. The only reason people would even have an interest in these things in the first place is because there is a side of us that wants to build, that wants to grow in a meaningful way, right? And so this is what's happening to so many of us, and this is also what's going on. This is also how, a lot of times we will be sold things in, commercials, advertisers, all that kind of stuff. This is why we're into so many of the things that we are into and that we are interested in, right? Let me give you an example. Sports is a very good example of this, okay? One time I had been, I spent some time in Israel, right? That's where I am right now, but I'm talking about previously. Spent some time, I spent some time in Israel studying in Jewish, studies and things like this. And then I went back I was there for about a year, and I went back to America afterwards. And a friend of mine tells me, "Hey, I got some Yankee tickets. You want to come to the game with me?" I said, "Sure." So sure enough, I go to the baseball game with this guy, and me and him are sitting there watching the game, and Yankees, I think, were playing the Oakland A's. I don't know if they still exist, but they're playing the Oakland Athletics, and the Yankees. Maybe there's two runners on base, and 2 outs in the bottom of the 8th inning. Yankees are down by I think a run, something like that, right? And sure enough, a guy hits the ball, Yankee guy hits the ball goes all the way back, rolls all the way back to the wall. One runner comes in to score. And here comes another runner. He's rounding third. Here comes the play at the plate. The entire, people in the stands, everybody stands up to see the play at the plate. And well, I'm sitting back there and I'm looking around, and people are cheering, whatever. And I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, this has to be the most pathetic excuse for something meaningful that has ever been invented, right? Now, don't get me wrong, entertainment value, no problem, absolutely. But the meaningfulness that people attribute to it, to the point that if your team gets bounced from the playoffs, you can actually be depressed for a week. The affinity that people have aligning themselves with a team right? Like, oh, we won, right? I don't know. I have not seen your championship ring after quote unquote your team wins, right? It's your team. Well, do you pay to get into the stadium? Because if you do, it's not your team, right? So, so there's a side of us that loves this stuff and aligns with this stuff because we are in a search for meaningfulness, and so we're so desperate for it, that we'll go to these artificial alternatives and label them meaningful when deep down we know they're not meaningful, right? And that's, by the way, why we're calling this Kabbalah and the Coca-Cola culture, because the Coca-Cola, back when I was a kid, they had a commercial, or they had a slogan, right? Always the real thing. And which was a crazy slogan for Coca-Cola, because if there's one product that we can say is the epitome of the artificial product that is out there on planet Earth, and certainly in America land, that would be Coca-Cola. There are people who use Coca-Cola as toilet bowl cleaner. I'm not joking. Google it. Okay. Yeah, or there's a rabbi of mine who says he doesn't make a blessing on Coca-Cola because he holds that it's not food, it's toilet bowl cleaner. Okay, I'm not saying that's halacha. I do make a bracha on Coca-Cola. Okay, but especially if you're one of these health people who doesn't drink this stuff usually, you might say that this isn't food, right? So, so that's the culture that can call Coca-Cola the real thing, and nobody just laughed in their face, but actually is a very successful advertising campaign. You got to recognize what's going on over there, right? And so it's the same thing. This is with sports. I mean, I saw an article a number of years back that there was someone who was, I think, lived in Vermont or New Hampshire. They were a lifelong Pittsburgh Steelers fan. Pittsburgh Steelers, a American football team. And the story goes that this guy, he would every Sunday, he would sit in his lazy boy, one of those things with the legs kick up, and he would have his beer or his cold beverage, and his wife would bring it to him, and he would have his Pittsburgh Steelers blanket that he would cover himself with. And every day, every week, every Sunday, he would watch his Steelers. Now, what happened was, though, that he never actually got to a game, and his time came, and he passed away. And his family had him cremated, and they decided, as a tribute to their father, they will give him in death what he could not have in life. And sure enough, they took the urn and they wrapped it in, maybe they wrapped it in the blanket. Let's say they did, because it adds to effect for the story. And they took him a few states over to Pittsburgh Steelers Stadium to see his first Pittsburgh Steelers game in person. Yes, this is true. I do not make up this story. This actually happened. And not only that, by the way, if you think this is unique, you would be wrong. You would be wrong, because a number of years ago, they have come out with a line of urns and caskets that are emblazoned with logos of sports teams. Baseball, I think, started it. It might be definitely in baseball. I think it came out in other hot sports as well. What does that mean? If you go ahead and do that, that means as a company, you did the market. This is a big undertaking. You did the market research, and you've discovered that it is a worthwhile investment to come out with these things, right? And therefore now you can, like people say they would die for their team. Well, now you actually can. And so this is real. There's money in all of this stuff. This is a real thing. What does that mean? It means that we are so much. Like, I mean, think about it. What goes on your tombstone? You know what I mean? Like, people sometimes say for motivation, like, what do you want that people should say about you at your, at your funeral? You're like, what is that? And that means like the end purpose, the sum up of this person's life, Pittsburgh Steelers. Do you realize how weird that is? Do you realize how messed up that is? Do you realize how that is the sum total? That is like the epitome, that epitomizes you on this world, on earth. And so, and so you see it also in the commercials, the sports commercials, where it's dramatized, and you see, maybe you see some over the shoulder, throw and catch over, and you see all the different pieces of, sports team working in unison. Can you hear that idea that that's like a messianic vision, when the grander cause, capital C, is revealed through all of the different detailed parts? That's a messianic message, my friends. But here it's coming to you in sports. You're getting that feeling through sports. Now, by the way, I don't mean to hate on sports. Sports is fine and wonderful as a mode of entertainment. It's when a person takes it to the next level that they're getting their meaningfulness in life, getting a certain level of meaningfulness out of it. So we crossed over a line from a state of entertainment, it's staying on the outside of me, versus me, I'm getting meaningfulness from it. All of a sudden, I've stepped into it on another level, right? And the part of me that's desiring growth and meaning, etc., instead of looking to my source, looking to God, searching for truth, that side of me is being pacified by something else, right? And the same thing, you see, by the way, you see it also in the rock concerts as well, right? You ever been to a rock concert? It used to be take out a lighter, when the slow song comes on, take out a lighter. Now you take your flashlight, you take your phone and you flip on the flashlight, right? Even the fire at rock concerts has gone artificial. But can you hear the idea? What's going on there for people? Why do people love that part so much? Right? It's because that me as an individual light is able to be attached to something that is so much more than me. But still, I'm meaningful, because without me, this little light wouldn't exist. But I'm also so much more than me because I'm attached to the whole. You hear that idea? So we love that feeling, and that's what we're supposed to be getting as we connect to the infinite, not just from a rock concert, right? So, so you have to recognize that this is what's going on for us, right? This is what's going on for us, and to recognize that we're being our desire for growth, our desire for meaningfulness, our desire for mattering, our desire to be more and live out more of who we are, and live out our soul, which goes beyond just our body, goes beyond the limitations that we seem to have in this world. That stuff is all being tapped into by the advertisers, right? And by all these other just different experiences and interests you might have. So remember, all of these things, there's nothing wrong inherently with these interests. Nothing wrong with the rock concert, nothing wrong with the sports, nothing wrong with comic books, okay? But when we get to this place where we feel like this need or desire, because it's coming from a place of meaningfulness, then we see we've allowed it to tap into something that it's replacing something that's really should be you and your personal growth, right? It's stepping in there to fill that void, right? And that's why if we do truly grow, if we do truly resolve to get connected to our Judaism, or get connected to our life, or become deeper, more realer people, and be introspective people, and people who go into ourselves and replace negative traits with positive traits and all that kind of stuff, and we're focusing in on that in a really strong way, we're going to find ourselves being less interested in these artificial supplements or substitutes for what true meaning actually is. And we're truly living our lives out for what they could be, what that actually looks like. We're going to find ourselves not interested in these things nearly as much, right? If people are truly living out who they are and who they can be, and truly living their life meaningfully, they are much less interested in movies. Okay, maybe once in a while, occasional thing to relax and unwind, but I'm not needing or desiring, paying $15 to go watch someone else be paid to pretending like they're really living life. I don't need that as much because I'm really living life. So I don't need to get that feeling from watching someone else pretend to make grand choices, because I'm making grand choices in the nitty-gritty of my life, right? And so that's the idea, right? What are those people who are into sports or into a sports team and finding meaningfulness of it? What do we call those people? We call them fans, short for fanatics, right? They become religious about their team, right? And then people say that unabashedly. They talk that way, right? And so what we need to do is become a fan of God, to become a fan of reality. And really, ultimately, the truth is to become a fan of ourselves, right? Become a fan of our souls, to become a fan of our potential. And so this is really, I believe, what we need to be, what the tikkun is, if you will, what the fixing is. Okay, so questions, thoughts, ideas. I actually really went through everything I wanted to say, to be honest with you. So that was quicker than usual. Fine. Oh, here. I have even a follow-up question for you guys. But hold on. Questions, thoughts, ideas. There you go. Post those questions. As you're posting your question, which everyone is invited to post one question, or even two. But as you're doing that, I will pose you a question. What is one example of the Coca-Cola culture in your life, right? And how can you envision rising above it? That is my question for you, my friends. Is it sports? Is it the rock concert? Is it the comic book collection? Is it the stamp collection? Is it the doll collection? Is it maybe you're collecting high-risers? Who knows? If you are, Sarah Rachel wants to talk to you. There you go. Social media and craving likes from people you barely know that are quote unquote called friends. Very good. That's a good one. That's a good one. Right? That's a whole other conversation. External validation, codependency. There's a lot to talk in that one too. It's maybe even its own topic. All right, cool. So look, my friends, since you're very talkative, I don't know, I don't have anything else to say. Usually this is a more interesting, not more interesting, more inspires more convo, but it's okay. We're not in person. We have to do the Zoom thing. Good, Baruch Hashem. Okay, so my friends, I hope this is meaningful. I hope this is helpful. I hope this clarifies some things about ourselves and what's going on within us. If anyone is interested in a little more about this kind of stuff, feel free to send me a quick hello, a quick email. And that's elliethejew@gmail.com. Hold on, I didn't quite understand what you just sent me, Vivian. Oh, okay, all good. So my friends, we're going to call it here today. God willing, I will see you again soon. It'll either be at the same time or a different time. Maybe Vivian, let's talk about it. My friends, have yourselves a great day. Great to see you. Thank you. And keep on keeping on, y'all.